My mother called me at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning and said, "You need to be reasonable about the house." I was standing in my kitchen with one hand around a coffee mug and the other holding the folder that contained my deed. The house was mine. Every dollar of the down payment was mine. Every mortgage payment, every repair bill, every insurance premium, every late-night shift and weekend overtime that had paid for it was mine. But my mother didn't say, "Congratulations." She didn't say, "How are you settling in?" She said, "Your sister has children. You don't. It's time you stopped being selfish." I remember looking through the glass doors toward the backyard. There were 2 cardboard boxes sitting beside the patio. Inside one were children's books. Inside the other were dishes I had inherited from my grandmother. Neither box belonged to my sister. Neither box belonged to my parents. But somehow, in less than a minute, my mother had made me feel like I was the trespasser in my own home. Then my father got on the phone. "Listen to your mother," he said. "You have 4 bedrooms and no children. Your sister has 2 children and barely enough space." I didn't answer. He continued, "It's not like we're asking you to give it away." That sentence almost made me laugh. Because they were. They just hadn't found the courage to use those exact words yet. My sister had already found a realtor. She had already measured the rooms. She had already chosen which bedroom her son would have. And according to my mother, the only remaining question was how quickly I could adjust. Then my sister sent me a text. "We're coming Saturday. Don't make this uncomfortable. Asterisk asterisk." I stared at those 6 words for almost a full minute. Then I typed, "Saturday is fine." I didn't tell them that Saturday was the day I had planned to reveal the one thing they had spent years making sure I never discovered. Because 3 nights earlier, I had found a letter in my grandmother's old cedar box. A letter written before she died. A letter addressed to me. And on the last page, beneath a paragraph that changed everything I thought I knew about my family, were 7 words that I still remember exactly. "Do not let them take what is yours." I had read that sentence 3 times. Then I had read it a 4th. Because I knew my grandmother. She never wrote dramatically. She didn't believe in revenge. She didn't believe in humiliating people. She believed in truth. And if Ruth had gone to the trouble of putting something in writing, it meant there was something she knew that I didn't. At the time, I thought the letter was about the house. I was wrong. It was about something much bigger. It was about why my family believed a childless woman didn't deserve a home. It was about the daughter they had erased from our family tree. And it was about a promise my grandmother had made 26 years earlier that my mother had spent her entire life trying to bury. My name is Elena Parker. I'm 41 years old. And for most of my life, I was the daughter everyone described as the strong one. I used to think that was a compliment. Now I understand it was an assignment. The strong one doesn't need help. The strong one can handle disappointment. The strong one can work late. The strong one doesn't need a bigger room. The strong one doesn't need anyone to check on her. The strong one doesn't have children, so she has no reason to complain about space. The strong one can give. And give. And give. Until everyone around her forgets she was ever supposed to receive anything. I learned that lesson young. My younger sister, Natalie, was the opposite. Natalie was emotional. Natalie needed reassurance. Natalie needed money. Natalie needed help with college. Natalie needed help with her first apartment. Natalie needed help after her divorce. Natalie needed help when she remarried. Natalie needed help with her children's school. Natalie needed help when her husband changed jobs. Every problem Natalie had became a family emergency. Every problem I had became a private matter. If Natalie cried, my mother drove across town. If I cried, my mother told me I was tired. If Natalie wanted something, my parents asked how they could help. If I wanted something, they asked whether I really needed it. I was 24 when I first understood the difference. My father had promised to help me buy a used car. I'd saved almost all the money myself. I was short by $3,000. I called him one night and asked if he could loan me the difference. He said, "We'll see." The next morning, Natalie called because she wanted a newer car. My father co-signed her loan. No discussion. No "we'll see." No questions. She got the car. I got a bus pass. My mother told me not to be bitter. "You're independent," she said. "That's a good thing." I nodded. But something inside me hardened. Not because Natalie got the car. Because my parents had taught me something without realizing it. I wasn't the child they worried about. I was the child they expected to survive. And once you become the person everyone expects to survive, people start believing survival is all you deserve. So I became very good at it. I worked. I saved. I studied. I eventually became a physical therapist and built a career that allowed me to live comfortably. I never married. That was not entirely by choice. There had been one serious relationship. His name was Daniel. We were together for almost 4 years. He wanted children. I wanted children too. At least I thought I did. But after years of trying to make the relationship work, we discovered we wanted different lives. He left. A year later, he married someone else. They had a baby. My mother sent me a photograph. No message. Just the photograph. Daniel holding his newborn daughter. I deleted it. Then I cried in the bathroom at work where nobody could hear me. That was the closest I ever came to telling my family how much I wanted children. Because somewhere along the way, I had learned that wanting something made you vulnerable. And vulnerability was dangerous in my family. So I stopped talking about it. Years passed. I bought a small townhouse. Then I sold it. I invested. I worked overtime. I saved. And eventually at 39, I bought the house my family would later decide I had no right to own. It wasn't enormous. 4 bedrooms. 3 bathrooms. A quiet street outside Asheville. A backyard with an old maple tree. A screened porch. A kitchen with terrible cabinets that I intended to replace someday. It wasn't a mansion. But it was mine. I remember the day I signed the closing documents. The attorney shook my hand. "Congratulations, Ms. Parker." I stepped outside with the keys in my palm. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely unclaimed. No parent. No spouse. No sibling. No one telling me where I belonged. Just me. And a house. I cried in the driver's seat for 20 minutes. Not because I was sad. Because I had finally built something nobody could take credit for. At least, that's what I believed. 6 months later, my mother called. "Your sister needs the house." Those were her words. Not would like. Not is interested in. Needs. I said, "She doesn't need my house." My mother sighed. "Elena, don't start." "I'm not starting anything." "She has 2 children." "I know. And you don't." There it was. The sentence that had been hiding underneath every conversation for years. I said nothing. My mother lowered her voice. "Your sister is raising a family. You have 4 empty bedrooms." "They aren't empty." "What do you mean?" "I use them." "For what?" I looked toward the hallway. At the time, the answer was complicated. One room was an office. One was a guest room. One held my grandmother's furniture and the boxes I hadn't unpacked. And the 4th was still empty. Not because I had no plans for it. Because I wasn't ready. I said, "That's not your concern." My mother became quiet. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You've always been selfish when it comes to your possessions." I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I suddenly understood how absurd the situation was. My parents had spent decades taking from me and calling it family. Now they wanted my home. And they were angry that I had the nerve to own one. "I bought the house," I said. My mother replied, "Nobody is questioning that." But they were. Of course they were. My father joined the call. "Your sister is not asking for the whole thing." I waited. "She just needs the main floor." I almost dropped my coffee. "The main floor?" "You could stay upstairs." In my own house. For a while. How long? My father didn't answer. My mother did. Until they get back on their feet. Natalie had never once been on her feet in the way other people were. Someone always held her up. I ended the call. That afternoon, I found a voicemail. It was Natalie. Hey. Mom says you're upset. Please don't turn this into a huge thing. We're family. The kids need stability. We'll talk when we come over. When? Not if. When? They had already decided. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my grandmother's cedar box. I had inherited it 2 years earlier. My mother had wanted it. My grandmother had left it to me. That alone had caused an argument. You don't even understand what those things mean, my mother had said. Maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't. But I understood that my grandmother had chosen me. Inside the box were photographs, recipes, jewelry, a small silver watch, and a bundle of letters tied with blue ribbon. I'd read most of them. Except one. It was sealed. My name was written on the front. Elena. Open only when you are ready to understand why I chose you. Asterisk asterisk. I had never opened it. Until that night. I broke the seal. The first page was ordinary. My grandmother talked about age. About mistakes. About how people sometimes spend their whole lives protecting the wrong thing. Then she wrote, "Your mother will tell you that I loved you more, because you were easier to manage. That is not true." Asterisk asterisk. I stopped reading. My hands went cold. I continued. "I chose you because you were the only one in this family who knew how to love someone without needing something in return." I wiped my eyes. Then came the sentence that changed everything. There was another daughter. I knew my grandmother had 2 daughters. My mother and my aunt. But my grandmother wrote, "There was another child before your mother." I read that sentence again. Then again. Her name was Clara. My grandmother had given birth to her when she was 17. Clara was placed with relatives for several years. Then she disappeared from the family records. My grandmother wrote that Clara had been raised by her father's sister. She had grown up only 40 miles away. And she had one daughter. A girl named Rose. My cousin. A person I had never heard about. Then the letter became darker. My grandmother explained that my mother had spent decades pretending Clara never existed. Why? Because Clara had challenged her. Clara had accused my grandfather of stealing money from her inheritance. My grandmother believed her. My mother didn't. The family fractured. Clara left. And my mother told everyone that she had abandoned the family. But according to my grandmother, that wasn't true. Clara had been pushed out. There was more. A house. A small farmhouse that had belonged to my great-grandfather. The house had been intended for Clara. But before the transfer was finalized, my grandfather sold it. My grandmother had protested. My mother had signed the paperwork. And Clara had received almost nothing. Then came the line that made me sit back in my chair. "Your mother has always believed that whatever I left you should have belonged to her." I whispered, "Why?" The answer was on the next page. Because my grandmother had left me something far more valuable than money. She had left me the legal rights to a trust. A trust established decades earlier. A trust connected to the farmhouse. I had no idea. The house I lived in wasn't part of it. But the trust contained an old property account. And that account had grown. For years. My grandmother had invested the proceeds from another property. The trust was now worth several $100,000. But there was a condition. It could only be accessed by me. And by one other person. My grandmother's eldest living descendant. Rose. My cousin. The woman my mother had spent decades pretending did not exist. I read the final page. My grandmother had written, "If you ever find Rose, don't give her money because you feel guilty. Give her the truth. She has spent her entire life believing this family abandoned her mother. She deserves to know they did." Asterisk asterisk. Then at the very bottom. "And Elena, If your family ever tells you that because you have no children you don't deserve what I left you, remember this. A woman does not become less of a person because her arms are empty. I couldn't breathe. I sat there for a long time. Then I noticed something. The letter wasn't dated, but another envelope was tucked behind it. A legal document. A copy of my grandmother's trust. And a handwritten note. Attorney's office. Ask for Martin Hale. He knows everything. Asterisk asterisk. The next morning I called Martin. He remembered my grandmother immediately. She told me you'd call someday, he said. My heart stopped. Did she? Yes. When? 3 months before she died. What did she say? He was quiet. Then, she said your family would eventually come for the house. I stared at the wall. She knew. She knew your mother believed you owed her. Why didn't she tell me? Because she didn't want you fighting your mother over something you hadn't earned yet. But I did earn the house. No, Martin said. You inherited the right to keep it. I didn't understand. He explained. My grandmother had helped me financially in ways I had never known. Not enough to buy the house, but enough to make sure I could build the savings. She had quietly funded an education account when I was 17. When I never used it, she transferred it into another investment. That investment became part of the trust. The trust had paid for a portion of my down payment. Legally, the house was still mine. But emotionally, my grandmother had chosen it as the place where I would finally stop living according to everyone else's rules. Martin told me something else. Rose was alive. And she lived only 2 hours away. I found her 3 days later. Her name was Rose Bennett. She was 42. She worked as a school librarian. She had a daughter. And she had never met my mother. When I called her, I didn't know what to say. So I told her the truth. My grandmother was Ruth Parker. Silence. Then Rose said, I know. My heart stopped. How? My mother kept a photograph. Your mother was Clara? Yes. I sat down. For the next hour, Rose told me the story from her side. It was different. Not completely, but enough. Clara had never wanted to abandon the family. She had begged my grandmother to defend her. My grandmother had tried. My mother had refused. And when Clara finally left, my mother told everyone she had chosen to walk away. Rose grew up believing that. She had spent her whole life wondering why nobody came. I told her about the letter. She cried. Not loudly. Just quietly. Like someone who had been waiting 20 years to hear that her memories were real. Then she asked, Why are you calling me now? I looked around my kitchen. At the house my family wanted. At the letter in front of me. At first, I said, because I thought you deserved the truth. And now, I swallowed. Because my family is trying to take my house. She laughed through her tears. Of course they are. It was the first time anyone had understood without me explaining. Rose didn't want revenge. Neither did I. But we both wanted something my mother had spent decades avoiding. A record. A truthful one. Martin helped us. The trust was legitimate. Rose had rights. And so did I. But there was another surprise. The farmhouse had never actually been sold. The paperwork my grandmother had found showed that my grandfather had transferred it to a corporation he controlled. That corporation dissolved years later. The title had been sitting in a legal mess. Martin believed it could be reclaimed. And if it was, it would belong to Rose. Not my mother. Not Natalie. Rose. The daughter of the woman they erased. But before any of that happened, my family came to my house. They arrived Saturday morning. Exactly as promised. Natalie came first. Her husband, Mark, followed. Then my parents. And behind them was a rented moving truck. I stood on the porch. Natalie smiled. Hey. I didn't move. She looked past me. You've really done a lot with the place. My mother walked around her. She entered without waiting for permission. That was the moment I understood. They hadn't come to discuss anything. They had come to take possession. My father stepped inside. "Where's the master?" I said. "You're not moving anything." My mother sighed. "Please don't embarrass yourself." Natalie looked uncomfortable. That was interesting, because until then, I had assumed Natalie was completely on board. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the floor. My mother turned to the movers. "Master bedroom first." One of them started walking. I said, "Stop." He stopped. My father turned. "This is family business." "No," I said. "This is trespassing." My mother laughed. "You wouldn't call the police on your own parents." I looked at her. "I would." Her smile disappeared. Then she noticed the woman sitting at my dining room table. Martin. Beside him was Rose. My mother froze. I had never seen her lose control of her face before. Not once. She looked at Rose. Then at me. Then back at Rose. "Who is that?" Rose stood. "My name is Rose Bennett." My mother's face went pale. My father whispered something I couldn't hear. Natalie looked confused. "Mom," my mother said, "we're leaving." But Martin stood. "No." He placed a folder on the table. "You're going to stay." My father stepped toward him. "Who are you?" "Martin Hale." My mother's eyes closed. She knew him. That was when I realized the letter had not only been a warning. It had been a trap for anyone who believed I was still the girl who wouldn't ask questions. Martin opened the folder. "This house is legally Elena's." My father scoffed. "We know that." "No," Martin said. "You don't." He handed him a document. "This house is protected by a trust." My mother grabbed the papers. She read. Then she looked at me. "You knew?" "Yes." "When?" "3 days ago." She shook her head. "You've been planning this." "No." I looked at Rose. "I've been learning the truth." My mother stared at her. Rose said quietly, "My mother was Clara." My mother said nothing. Natalie looked between them. "Who is Clara?" That question destroyed my mother more than anything I could have said. Because Natalie genuinely didn't know. My father sat down. My mother remained standing. Rose pulled a photograph from her bag. It showed 3 women. My grandmother, my mother, and a younger woman I recognized only because of the shape of her eyes. "Clara." Rose placed it on the table. "This is my mother." Natalie picked it up. "Why have I never seen this?" No answer. She looked at my mother. "Mom." My mother finally said. "She left." Rose shook her head. "No. She abandoned us." "No. She made her choice." Rose's voice stayed calm. "She was 17 when you convinced everyone she was unstable." My mother flinched. "You don't know anything." "I know my mother kept every letter you sent her." My mother went still. Rose continued. "I know you told Grandma she couldn't be trusted." My father said, "Enough." Rose looked at him. "No." Then she placed another document on the table. My mother wasn't crazy. Martin spoke. She was legally declared competent. My father looked at my mother. And for the first time, I saw something that resembled fear. Natalie was crying. "You knew about her?" My mother said nothing. "You knew I had an aunt?" Silence. Natalie turned to me. "Why didn't you tell me?" I answered honestly. "Because I didn't know." That was the moment the family story collapsed. Not because I screamed. Not because I insulted anyone. Because the truth was sitting on the table in documents they couldn't argue with. My father stood. "We're leaving." Martin said. "You can leave." Then he pointed to the moving truck outside. "But the movers are staying." My father looked confused. Martin continued. "The truck was hired under the assumption that Elena was surrendering possession of this home." He smiled faintly. "She isn't." The movers slowly started carrying the boxes back inside. Natalie covered her face. My mother sat down. I watched her. And strangely, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Because revenge is satisfying in stories. In real life, watching your mother realize that she can no longer control the version of you she invented is heartbreaking. Even when she deserves it. My mother looked at me. Why didn't you tell me? I almost laughed. Tell you what? That you found the letter. I knew you'd deny it. She looked away. You always thought I was a bad mother. No. I shook my head. I thought you were a frightened mother. She looked at me. You were afraid of losing control. She said nothing. And you spent your entire life making sure nobody else could leave, before you could reject them. Her eyes filled. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered Clara. And Rose. And every year of silence. I remembered how many people had been sacrificed to preserve the image of our perfect family. So I didn't apologize. I didn't comfort her. I simply said, "It's over." My father left first. Natalie stayed. She sat at the kitchen table for almost an hour. Finally she said, "I didn't know. I believe you. I thought Mom was telling the truth." "I know." She looked at the hallway. "I really was going to move in." "I know. I'm sorry." That was harder to hear than I expected, because Natalie had been selfish. But she hadn't invented the system. She had simply benefited from it. I told her, "You don't owe me a house." She looked at me. "You owe me honesty." She nodded. Then she left. The following week, the legal battle over the farmhouse began. It lasted months. My mother refused to cooperate. My father tried to challenge the trust. Martin was prepared. The documents held. The corporation's records were found. And eventually, the court recognized the original transfer. The farmhouse was returned to the family line. But not to my mother. To Rose. She stood on the porch the day the keys were handed over. I stood beside her. She cried. I didn't. I had cried enough for that family. Rose turned to me. "Do you want to come inside?" I smiled. "No." She laughed. "Why not?" "Because it's yours." She looked at the house. Then back at me. "You know what Mom would have wanted." "What?" "She would have wanted us to stop fighting over who deserved a place." I nodded. Rose squeezed my hand. "I think Grandma knew that." She did. Months later, I changed the fourth bedroom in my house. It was no longer empty. My younger sister Natalie eventually rented an apartment of her own. She and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. Not perfectly. Slowly. My parents and I stopped speaking. At first, that silence hurt. Then it became peaceful. And one Sunday afternoon, a package arrived at my house. There was no return address. Inside was my grandmother's original letter, the one I had given to Martin. Someone had returned the original. On the back, in handwriting I recognized, was a note. "You finally came back to yourself." I sat on the floor and cried. Not because I missed my grandmother. I did. But because for the first time, I understood what she had been trying to tell me. My family had spent years measuring a woman's worth by what she produced. Children. Money. Security. Status. A perfect photograph. A clean family tree. But my grandmother had understood something they never did. A family is not the people who demand a place at your table. It's the people who make room for you at theirs. A few weeks later, Rose brought her daughter to visit. Her little girl ran through my hallway. She stopped outside the bedroom that had been empty for years. "Can I see this room?" I opened the door. She looked around. There was a bookshelf. A desk. A window overlooking the maple tree. She smiled. "This is beautiful." I smiled back. "It's yours whenever you visit." She hugged me. And for the first time, the room didn't feel empty. It felt full of possibility. That night, I stood on the porch alone. The house was quiet. No voices demanding anything. No one telling me who deserved which bedroom. No one measuring my worth against somebody else's children. I thought about the sentence my mother had said on that first phone call. "You don't have children." For years, I had heard that as an accusation. That night, I finally heard it differently. I didn't have children. But that didn't mean my life was empty. I had built a home. I had protected a family member who had been erased. I had helped Rose find the truth about her mother. I had repaired what could be repaired with Natalie. And I had finally stopped confusing being needed with being loved. The house stayed mine. Not because I defeated my family. Not because I had better lawyers. Not because my grandmother left me a secret. It stayed mine because I finally understood something I should have understood at 24. When my father chose Natalie's car over mine, my life did not require their permission. And neither did my home. The last time I saw my mother was outside the courthouse. She stood beside my father. Older than I remembered. Smaller somehow. She looked at me. I thought she might say something. She didn't. Then she turned away. I almost called her back. Almost. But I remembered Clara. I remembered Rose. And I remembered the little girl who had once believed that being forgotten meant she wasn't worth remembering. So I let my mother walk away. Some doors should be closed. Not slammed. Not locked in anger. Just closed. Because peace isn't always reconciliation. Sometimes peace is finally realizing that you don't have to keep knocking. I drove home that afternoon. I parked in my driveway. I walked inside. And before I went to bed, I took my grandmother's letter out one last time. I read the final line. A house is not valuable because of how many people want it. It is valuable because of who feels safe inside it. Asterisk asterisk. I folded the letter, placed it in the cedar box, and locked the box. Then I walked down the hallway, past the office, past the guest room, past the room that had once been filled with boxes nobody cared about, and into the fourth bedroom, the one my mother had called wasted space. There was a small wooden chair by the window, a bookshelf, a lamp, and on the wall, I had framed one photograph. My grandmother, Clara, Rose, and me. 4 generations of women who had been separated by secrets. For women who in one way or another had been told they were too much, not enough, too difficult, too independent, too emotional, too childless, too forgotten. I looked at the photograph. Then I smiled. Because the room wasn't wasted. Neither was my life. And neither was the woman they had spent years trying to erase. Her name was Clara. Her daughter was Rose. Her granddaughter stood in my hallway. And my grandmother's letter had made sure the truth survived all of them. That was the real inheritance. Not the house. Not the money. Not the trust. The truth. And once the truth belongs to you, nobody can move it out of your bedroom. Nobody can sell it. Nobody can divide it up. And nobody can tell you that because your life looks different from theirs, you deserve less of it. I used to think being childless meant I had failed some invisible test. Now I know better. A woman's life isn't measured by how many children call her mother. It isn't measured by the size of her house. It isn't measured by whether her family approves of the way she lives. It's measured by what she builds with the life she was given. And after 41 years of being the strong one, the useful one, the quiet one, the one who could always manage on her own, I finally learned that I was allowed to be the one who stayed, the one who said no, the one who kept the key, the one who opened the door for someone else, and the one who decided, at last, who belonged inside. My family thought a childless woman owed them her house. My grandmother knew better. She left me something no one could take. A home, a history, a name, and a letter that disagreed.